Hi, my name's Evan Klein. I'm a fantasy book writer and I do that in Notion. And I wanted to share my setup with you guys just to show you how I'm going about it and what's possible in Notion. And hopefully you'll learn something from it. And if you guys know more than me, you can give me some tips as well. So here we go. So here we are in my dashboard, one of my dashboards, that is. On the side here is a synced block that has five of my dashboards. Got a library. This is where I keep all my databases, world building, manuscript, planning. This is the main one I wanted to talk about today. This is the stage I've been working on the most in my novel, so this is the most filled out dashboard at the moment. I'm constantly improving the functionality of it. I'm not one of those super aesthetic Notion designers. I really try to make it as clean and as functional as possible. That being said, I don't love how this is laid out quite at the moment. The top section here is kind of a quick snapshot of my plotting. I have it broken into three different P's. We have my progress, processing, and then my principles. So progress, these are currently my four point of view characters. The process section, this is where I have ideas related to my plot that I know I want to use, but they haven't been slotted in somewhere in my story yet. And then principles are high level ideas I've taken from classes or reading books on writing stories that I want to make sure to keep top of mind. So, for instance, curiosity and concern are the two things that keep a narrative interesting and readers wanting to read. Either they're concerned and worried about a character, or they're curious about a mystery or some unsolved plot element in the story. Different things like that. In some of these, I have more writing where I've taken notes more in depth. Some of them don't, but this little icon here indicates if there's more writing. This is a high level overview of my character plots. I really like being extremely organized with my plotting. I've tried to I've tried to write almost every novel I've tried to write up until this point. I have not plotted ahead of time and I've never finished. I finished a couple short stories, but never anything of novel length. This time I'm plotting out my novel ahead of time, and I think I find I'm actually a plotter naturally. So the way I have this listed out, I can talk about this more in future videos if anyone wants to learn about it, but the top graphic is the emotional arc I want my characters to have. Or in some ways, you could just think about this as their story arc. There was an interesting study that came out a few years ago that found there's really only six different, I believe they called them emotional arcs in a story, but basically values of the story either being positive or negative. And these are four of the six kind of emotional arcs. But this just gives me an idea of the shape I want these different character stories to have. Um, and this graph indicates if something negative is happening to the character or something positive is happening to the character. And then the second section, another framework that suggests there's seven different story arcs or story types that a book can have. And those are broken into action, crime, horror, which are all plot stories, plot driven stories, love, which is a plot and a character driven story, and then worldview, validation, and redemption, which are character driven stories. And you could Google that and find a lot of information about it. But the thing I've done that I find really helpful is combine this idea of the seven different story arcs the six different story arcs with the seven different story types. So, for instance, with Shiri, part of her plot is actually a horror plot, which the change in value is going from a fate worse than death or torment to escape. And so on this graph, what I'm doing is the positive and negative attributes I'm playing with in her story are the positive attributes are escape and safety, and then the negative attributes are torment. So as this graph and as her story goes down, she's going to go closer and closer to torment and a fate worse than death, and then she's going to come back out of it, and then she's actually going to have a tragic ending of sorts. And then similarly, um, Jana is going to be a more traditional action plot. Her arc, she's going to start in a safe, successful place. She's going to fail, go into more dangerous situations, and then come back out of it and be safe and successful again. And you can kind of see how that's what I'm playing with. So Drayden is going to be a love or relationship plot, and he's going to start off connected. Again, that's the two values that relationship plots are dealing with. The negative side is disconnected, and the positive side is connected. So he's going to start connected, and he's also going to have a tragic arc and end disconnected. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about my plots. And then this is the kind of meat and potatoes where all of this is done. Spoilers for my story, by the way, not that it's going to come out in the near future, but if for whatever reason you don't want to know anything about it, just stop watching this video. But here, the actual scenes I'm writing to kind of construct these arcs are based on the 27 chapter method. The 27 chapter method was first introduced, as far as I can tell, by a woman named Kat O'Keefe. She is also a YouTuber, though it seems like she's been radio silent for a few years on YouTube. She introduced this idea, which I became persuaded by, that a novel can be broken up into 27 separate scenes. And the way that's primarily done is it's based off the 3-act structure, and then each act is divided into threes again, into what she calls blocks, which gives you 9. The 9-act story plotting method is a thing out there, as is the 7-act. So that's kind of already within some other frameworks. And then each block is broken up into 3 chapters, she calls them, but 3 different scenes basically. And so that gives you 27 in total different chapters, or different clear changes in the story that happen, that give you a pretty clear framework. And again, all these things, at least the way I view them, are not strict guidelines I have to follow, but rather suggestions just to help me get in the ballpark of the kind of story I want to write. I don't necessarily think for every character, each one of these 27 chapters is actually going to be a chapter in the story. Some of them might be a paragraph, some of them might be 3 chapters. It just depends on how much emphasis I want to put on different points in the story. Anyway, combining all these things together is how I'm thinking about plotting. Just to add on to the 27 chapter method, each set of 3 things are basically character being in stasis or resolution from a previous thing that happened, something that disrupts that stasis, and then an immediate reaction to that disruption, trying to resolve and achieve stasis again, and then the loop repeats. So every single set of 3 is basically that. The 3-act structure is divided that way. And then every set of 3 story beats is basically the character finds stability, something happens to disrupt that stability, the character struggles to try to achieve a new sense of stability. I'm modulating whether bad things are happening to the character or good things are happening to character in each of those disruption points, based on my emotional arc graphs or story arc graphs. So you can see here, I have this set up in Notion where each of these groups in this Kanban board are one of my point of view characters. And then at the top is kind of the guiding 27 chapter method, like what each scene should be focused on. So at the very beginning, the first chapter is introduction, inciting incident, immediate reaction, and then Rebellion. If anyone wants me to talk more in depth about the 27 chapter method, I can definitely do a video on that. Kat O'Keefe has a couple videos on it, and I would recommend looking those up. But basically, this whole set of 9 scenes is Act 1. And then I have tabs here that divide into Acts 2 and 3. And then I can plot all my main point of view characters together and kind of see scenes lining up, see if I want their paths to cross ways and connect together. And the idea of doing this is not necessarily new. You can look up different plotting or outlining methods. I know like J.K. Rowling has a really famous hand-drawn plotting grid that she's done, and there's a couple other authors who do a version of this. I just really like Notion, and I think it works really well with this. And it's super easy for me just to, if I'm like, this actually should belong here, or no, this goes here. It's really easy to just kind of move stuff around as I see fit. And then as I plot this out, that is what this little progress indicator is. This is how much of the character's story I've plotted out. And so what this is checking is, does each of these 27 sections have something in it? And if it has at least something in it, it increments this number by 1 from 1 to 27. And then 27, it means I'm complete. And then everything else is shown as a percentage using this ring here. So as you can see, I'm a little past Act 1 with most of my characters. Jana, I've just started outlining Act 1, and I'm about to start Act 2 with most of my characters. The final thing I really wanted to show and highlight, I have separate dashboards for each of my point of view characters. So Drayden's story arc, emotional arc is a riches to rag. That's the kind of official or unofficial name for this type of story where they start in a good place and end in a bad place. So the individual point of view character plotting areas look similar to the main one, except in this case, instead of having the other point of view plots, I have other stories which I'm kind of modeling out this character. Brandon Sanderson has a class online, which is great. He has multiple versions of the class actually, where he teaches a creative writing class at BYU. I would highly recommend listening to it. But he talks about how it's really handy to take a story archetype, like if you want to write a heist, or if you want to write underdog sports story, or there's these kind of story archetypes that you can look at a few of your favorites and kind of see what is similar between them and kind of model your story after that. And he's talked about doing that with Kaladin and his Stormlight Archives and in the Mistborn books with the heist stuff. So that's really what I'm doing here is I have this setup where I can plot out other stories really easily and then can kind of look at them at a glance and see, okay, here's how I want to structure my character based on these other stories I'm drawing from. And then what I'm doing is I'm seeing what the similarities between all these are and seeing if I can extract out what makes a riches to rags story tick. Like, are there certain aspects of it that are required or seem to be required because a lot of different type stories similar to that do the same thing. And so I created a separate riches to rags plot where I'm kind of building my own repertoire of plots I can use like in the future as guides. This is what a typical riches to rags story looks like. And that's basically it on the plotting. Just wanted to show you guys this real quick. I haven't really seen any great videos on YouTube of people showing how they write books in Notion. And so I wanted to throw my hat in the ring about how I'm working on it. And hopefully, this is helpful for you guys and gives you a good sense of what's possible in Notion. If you like this, please like the video. If you want to see more about kind of my other dashboards or how I'm thinking about writing or using Notion for writing, please let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. That's it for the planning dashboard. If there's anything you'd like to see next, let me know. I hope it's interesting to see some of the ways behind the scenes that I do some of my plotting for my book and how I use Notion to do that. If there's anything you want to see in more detail, please just ask in the comments. I hope this inspires you to potentially start using Notion and learn more about Notion. I think it's a great tool for writing and being organized with your book plotting, and as I hope to do in future videos, showing how powerful it can be for things like world building in a fantasy novel setting. But that's it for this week. I'll see you next time.